Welcome to this rapid revision session on Operation Rolling Thunder, 1965 to 1968. Firstly, some keywords and terms to understand this topic. The first is strategic bombing, using planes to bomb factories, bridges and other important sites to harm the enemy behind the battlefield. Next is SAM, which stands for Surface to Air Missile, a way of shooting planes down. And lastly, MiG, a Russian-built fighter aircraft, of which various variants were used. These were supplied by Russia and by China, but most commonly the MiG-17, which was a very manoeuvrable subsonic aircraft, and the MiG-21, which was a more advanced supersonic aeroplane. Firstly, let's consider the pilots involved with Operation Rolling Thunder on the American side. Here we've got a comparison between two pilots, one from the Second World War and one from the Vietnam War. This World War II pilot flew a single-engine, propeller-powered fighter with 6 machine guns and had 2 to 6 months of training before combat. He must be fairly successful though. You can see some kill markings on the cockpit of his P-51 Mustang. Compare that to this Vietnam pilot. He flew a twin-engine supersonic jet fighter with complex radar and navigation computers, armed with heat-seeking and radar-guided missiles, and later with a 6,000 bullets per minute rotary cannon and up to 6,000 pounds of bombs with a targeting computer. In fact, this job was so demanding that he needed a backseater to operate the radar and to help him navigate. His training took 5 to 10 years. What's the catch? This is the same man, Colonel Robin Olds, aged 22 in the Second World War and aged 43 in the Vietnam War. The point is, not all pilots would have been quite so experienced as Robin Olds, but clearly losing a pilot in the United States Air Force of the Vietnam War would be much harder to replace than losing one in the Second World War. And that made what happened with Operation Rolling Thunder and the losses that the United States incurred during it all that harder to take, especially for very little result. So how did it work? Operation Rolling Thunder worked pretty much like this. US bombers flew missions from bases in Thailand and from aircraft carriers in the Gulf of Tonkin. We have F-105 Thunder Chief fighter bombers coming in from Thailand, and here we got A-4 Skyhawks, much lighter bomber and fighter aircraft. When I say fighters, they weren't really designed for shooting down other planes, but they occasionally did. The bombers hit strategic targets in North Vietnam. These would be things like factories, bridges, oil refineries, etc. But they didn't do it unopposed. North Vietnam was defended. This was by very advanced Soviet-built weapons, with Russian-built MiG fighters and surface-to-air missiles like the SA-2 Guideline, which is pictured there, probably the most advanced long-range missile of the era. And also it's worth bearing in mind that North Vietnam was supplied by Communist China and Russia. The USA could not hit these countries. Doing so would spark World War III. Not worth the risk. So they could only hit a certain number of strategic targets with any amount of success in Vietnam itself. So did this work? In short, no. Let's look at why. President Johnson authorised a bombing campaign of North Vietnam. Initially, North Vietnamese army defences were weak, but eventually they had Russian and Chinese supplied SAMs and fighters. Ultimately, Rolling Thunder failed because it did not succeed in making the North give up. Bear in mind too that the United States pilots had very severe restrictions on what they could bomb. Political interference from Washington was a nightmare, with limited target lists and even a denial that they could hit ships bringing in surface-to-air missiles or surface-to-air missiles that were being set up for fear of hitting Russian sailors or Russian instructors teaching the North Vietnamese how to use them. The same went for the MiG air bases where the fighters would take off from. There were Russian instructors there, and so to avoid escalating the war, for a lot of the time the US bombers were forbidden from hitting those targets. But let's look at the wider reasons why Rolling Thunder failed. The effects of Rolling Thunder could be seen like this. Bombing caused significant damage to roads and bridges on the Ho Chi Minh Trail, which was not strictly part of the strategic bombing effort, but it did happen. But it was constantly repaired. Amounts of supplies moved on the trail actually increased as time went on, and the North Vietnamese army developed tunnels to help cope with this and hide their soldiers and supplies. Also destruction. Bombs, including napalm, caused destruction, but the Vietnamese became even more determined to win as a result. Opinion around the world turned against the US because of their bombing. Also industry. Bombing affected North Vietnamese factories and industry, but most of their war supplies came from the USSR and China, so they couldn't be hit anyway. And aid. Chinese and Russian aid to North Vietnam was not targeted. So China still sent aid, and the USSR aid raised from $210 million in 1965 to a whopping $505 million in 1967. So Rolling Thunder did damage, but not damage that caused the North to give up. Here we can see a precision airstrike on a bridge. That's all very well, but there were other bridges, and they were often quickly repaired. Also, collateral damage on the towns surrounding could cause harm to the United States' reputation. Losses in these areas were also incredibly severe. You could make out little puffs of white smoke, which are actually anti-aircraft fire. Here we can see the effects of an F-105D Thunder Chief which has been shot down. That streak of smoke shows the remains of the SA-2 guideline missile breaking up. They would blow up with a proximity fuse, not needing to hit the target to cause devastating damage, and the F-105 is doomed, catching fire. That pilot's going to need to bail out, and the chances are he's going to be captured. So why didn't they use the B-52s? Here we can see what was known as an Arclight Strike. This would have been done by 3 to 4 B-52s flying in formation, devastating an area about half a mile long and about a quarter of a mile wide. Well, the answer is that there was a restricted target list, and B-52s simply were not precise enough to hit them. It wasn't about obliterating the North, it was about hitting specific targets, and meddling from Washington meant that those target lists were always rather small. So let's look at two interpretations of Rolling Thunder. One suggests that it was a waste of time. One suggests that it did some good for the American cause. See if you can spot which one. Interpretation 1 is from the Vietnam War, 1956 to 1975, written in 2014 by Andrew West. He is discussing Operation Rolling Thunder. The North's war supplies came in the main from its communist allies, who the American bombers could not reach. Although the US dropped over 643,000 tons of bombs on North Vietnam, the return on this investment was negligible or tiny. Estimates by 1967 suggest that it cost the US $9.60 to inflict $1 of damage. In addition, the fighter bombers that carried out the bulk of the bombing stood only 50% chance of surviving their one-year tour of duty. Let's check out the other one then. From the Vietnam War 2007 by Mitchell K. Hall. He is discussing Rolling Thunder. During 1966, Rolling Thunder expanded to include North Vietnam's oil storage facilities, including those in the Hanoi and Haiphong areas, and destroyed 70% of the North's capacity. Sorties, which means missions, reached 108,000 in 1967, so that's 108,000 aeroplanes who were just taken off on a mission, dropping 226,000 tons of bombs on North Vietnam. During that year, the United States hit electrical, steel and cement factories and targets near Hanoi, Haiphong and the Chinese border, with an estimated damage of $340 million. Clearly, interpretation 1 is suggesting that the amount of damage done did not justify the cost in men, machines and money. But interpretation 2 is suggesting that actually a lot of damage was done and that perhaps this was worth it. Let's hear from one of the pilots who took part then. This is Lieutenant Colonel Billy Sparks, and here he is roughly today. Billy Sparks, he wasn't very happy with the performance in Operation Rolling Thunder. He was happy with his aircraft, he was happy with his own performance and that of his pilots, but he was not happy with the targeting systems. I apologise in advance for the mild profanity that he feels inclined to use here. I think it emphasises the point though. There were 3 massive areas in a North Vietnamese steel mill. We hit it for 10 days, and it was dead after the second day, but we continued to hit it for 10 days, twice a day, told to go and bomb the snot out of it. And we're losing airplanes. We probably lost 10 to 15 airplanes bombing that stupid rail facility. Then we moved over and took out the blast furnaces and we bombed that for 10 days, and that was dead after the second. And they, the North Vietnamese, are moving in more and more SAMs and more guns and more MiGs, and we lost a whole bunch of other guys. By the time we were through, the whole place looked like the surface of the moon, and then they'd send us to bomb some other piece of crap and we were at it for 30 days. We could have done the whole bloody thing in a couple of days. The man is clearly angry, and that interview was recorded 30 years after the events. Some final points then. Operation Rolling Thunder was a long, sustained but limited strategic bombing campaign. It was intended to end the North Vietnamese ability and will to fight. It failed because targets were poorly selected with meddling from Washington. The factories making the weapons were in Russia and China. These could not be hit. And Vietnamese air defences were strong. US losses as a result were high. The Thud, that was the affectionate nickname for the Thunder Chief aeroplane pictured above, was named after the sound it made when it hit Vietnamese mountains. Over half of the production run of the Thud was destroyed in combat. I don't know of any other combat aircraft in history with a worse loss rate. So, as a result, Rolling Thunder was abandoned in 1968 in favour of other tactics. That's the end of this rapid revision video. It's been a bit longer than some, but I hope that you've appreciated the extra detail. If you have, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and if there's anything that you're desperate for me to do a rapid revision on a session next, please put it in the comments below and I'll see what I can do. Thanks for watching.